Blog Talk Radio.
We are the UR Tennis Network. Our mission is to be the voice of tennis. We enlist a team of passionate enthusiasts to promote our sport. We strive to bring interesting perspectives on the many spins of tennis. Our goal is to provide the learners of our sport with current news and information from many angles. We seek active participation from communities interested in tennis, but tennis is not interested in them. We are expanding our outreach. Tennis is a true lifetime sport that needs to be talked about, and the UR Tennis Network pledges to pursue this idea relentlessly.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Parenting Aces radio show on Blog Talk Radio's UR Tennis Network. I'm your host, Lisa Stone, and we are going to be talking all things college tennis this afternoon with ITA President David Benjamin. I hope those of you who are tuning in had the chance to listen to the show last time David was on. He gave us some great information on the history of college tennis and where it's moving in the future. And today I want to really focus on how he saw the 2013-2014 season go and what's coming for next year in 2014-2015. I thankfully had the opportunity to finally meet David live and in person at the NCAA Championships in Athens last week, and it was such a pleasure to finally get to meet him face to face. He is a lovely man whose passion for the sport just oozes out of every pore, and I'm really thrilled to have him with us today. So without further ado, let me bring David on the line and we'll get going. David, thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you, Lisa. One, thank you for such kind words, which I'm not sure I deserve them, but I appreciate that. And thank you for your show and helping to inform the tennis public and the people interested in sports about college tennis. We need a lot more shows like your show to create just more awareness of how special college tennis is.
Absolutely, and I really think, and I've shared this with you before, that we as a sport have got to preserve college tennis as a goal for our junior players coming up, and I think that in order to generate interest in the sport, college tennis has to be an integral part of that, and young juniors coming up have to be able to get to matches and watch these college players in action. I mean, there is nothing in my mind more thrilling than sitting at a college match and cheering for your team, and even if you don't have a team, just cheering for the players out there laying it all on the line. I absolutely love that aspect of our game, and am really looking forward to being able to watch my son play, hopefully in another year and a half. He'll be out there competing. So I thank you for all you do for college tennis. Our audience may not know you have been involved in tennis pretty much your entire life. I mean, from childhood on, you played collegiate tennis, you coached tennis, you've written books, and you've been head of the Intercollegiate Tennis Association for 40-something years now. I mean, it's
a long time.
A long time, and I mean, you're really a walking encyclopedia of college tennis, but also tennis in general. So I look forward to hearing from you today about your thoughts on how this last year went. Just a reminder to the listeners, there was a format experiment that happened at the beginning of the spring season in January, and maybe you can kind of give us a rundown on how that format experiment came to be and your thoughts on how it went.
Sure. Well, actually, the experimenting that we did, which was for 6 weeks in January through sort of the middle of February, and it involved all of the matches that were not conference matches were asked to try to use a format. There were actually two formats, a men's version and a women's version, as an experiment in the ITA kickoff weekends and also in our ITA men's and women's national indoor team championships. We did that format. But this wasn't the first time. We did exactly the same thing a year ago, 6 weeks, and we had a format that we were trying then, and had data from that experiment. And so we've experimented over the years with a lot of different possibilities. And one of the rules that the ITA passed about 30 years ago, and is still in effect, and the NCAA honors that, is that when teams play a team match, if both coaches agree, and it's not against the policy of the conference, the format of the match can be almost any version you want to imagine. The only stipulation is you have to have at least 6 people participating. And over the years, a lot of coaches have tried many different things. Again, the endless search to find a better way to do anything or everything. And of course, as you said, Lisa, I've been involved with tennis quite a long time now. And when I was a kid growing up, number one, the U.S. Open wasn't called the U.S. Open. It was the U.S. Nationals. I actually played in it at Forest Hills one year. Pros weren't allowed to play in it, so that was a huge change in 68, 69, when for the first time you could play in the Grand Slam events or Davis Cup and be a professional. And when a gentleman named Jimmy Van Allen, and we'll talk a little more about NOED, in terms of our format, but when Jimmy Van Allen, who was a tennis fan and loved tennis and built the International Tennis Hall of Fame in Newport, he came up with something called the Van Allen Simplified Scoring System, VASSS, and it involved tiebreakers. And when I played college tennis back in the 60s, there was no such thing as a tiebreaker. Every set you just kept playing until you got 2 games ahead of the other person. So you could have a 12-10 set or a 15-13 set. And when he suggested tiebreakers, there was a lot of concern, and many people felt that this was going to destroy tennis, because the idea of tennis is that it's indefinite. There's no ending. But now with the tiebreaker, and I should say the original tiebreaker he created was a 9-point tiebreaker. So when you got in a set to 6-all, you had 9 points, and that 9th point decided the set. That enough people felt that wasn't a good type of system, so then they created the current tiebreaker, which people that remember Bud Collins know he called it lingering death instead of sudden death. So the tiebreaker was a big revolution at the time, and also when I was a kid in NCAA tennis, when I was playing tennis and first coaching, everything was 3 out of 5 sets. So going to 2 out of 3 sets was a big change. So, so I think it's part of the DNA of, and it's not unique to tennis, of many sports to try to keep finding ways to keep the integrity of the game, but find ways to do things a little better. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So that's kind of a long preamble, Lisa, to why we were experimenting now. And the reality is that over the last several years, and again, there are many changes that did occur. The way the college team match takes place now, which is you play doubles first, a pro set, then singles. That change was made by the ITA in 1993, and that was considered a revolution. And someone as famous and successful as Dick Gould, even and he's part of our steering committee, said, I was dead set against it. I thought it was going to destroy the team match, and after 1 year, I think it's the best thing we ever did. So that was a big, big change. And I got calls for years and years from very famous tennis players and people that love college tennis saying, how could you possibly destroy doubles by having the doubles a pro set and then 3 doubles matches are worth only 1 point? You're making doubles so much less important. And I said, no, we're making it more important, because everyone has to play doubles in the match now. And before, very often you'd win the match in the singles and never play doubles, or you'd be up 4-2 and know that you only had to win 1 doubles match, and so you knew it was pretty set who was going to win the team match. So I tried to explain to people, now we're talking 15 years ago, but even now I think some people say, well, mathematically, in a team match that's worth 7 points, the doubles now is only worth 1 point, whereas before, out of 9 points, it was worth 3 points. So you're making doubles less important. But I think, and I think most coaches agree that really wasn't what we were trying to do. So in terms of...
Just 1 second, David, I would just point out that Division I is the only collegiate division that has the doubles point as 1 point. In the other divisions, they play to 9, and each doubles counts for 1 point. So there are 3 doubles points to be had and 6 singles points to be had. Division I is the only one where the 3 doubles courts compete for 1 point added to the team total. So I just want to clarify.
And I appreciate that, and I should have, the experimenting that we have been doing that we're talking about is just Division I, so I should have made that clear, and I appreciate your making it clear. We've had, the ITA oversees all divisions, and we've had a lot of discussions with Division II, III, but one of our rules is that each division has autonomy and can decide what it feels works best. There are a number of coaches that would like to see the other divisions do the way Division I is doing, but that's up to them to decide. There was a reason for giving it only 1 point, and it's very simple. Before, when you did singles first, if the match was 3-all or 4-2, obviously doubles was very important, but if you won the match in singles, it was over. But the concern was if you went doubles first and you gave each doubles a value of 1 point, that if a team swept the doubles and got 3 points and only needed, again, to win the team match, they only needed then 2 more points, that it would be very difficult in a team match worth 9 points for a team down 3-0 to come back. And so that was the reason. It was just a concern that it would make doubles almost too important beyond the numerical value. And there's no absolute right or wrong, but what I can say pretty definitively is in 1993, that's 20 years ago, there has been a general acceptance, and although there's interest in simultaneous, and now we're talking about maybe making some other changes, I would say the greatest concern in terms of the experimenting we're now doing is that there are a lot of coaches that think it works great and they don't want to see a change. So, but in any case, Lisa, you're absolutely right. It's a Division I format that that allocates only 1 point to the doubles. But whether it's 1 or 3, making doubles go first means you have to play doubles in a team match, and that's really, really important. So, again, going back to where are we now, what created the catalyst for the experiment, it really began a couple of years ago, and in the summer of 2012, I believe, the NCAA Tennis Committee discussed and put forward some recommendations that were fairly radical, and they at that point involved having the team championship only have 4 teams at the final site, and it also involved in singles playing 2 sets in a match tiebreaker instead of a third set. So that began the process of of saying, well, if the NCAA Tennis Committee, because if the tennis committee makes a decision that's approved by the championship cabinet, because that's the protocol at the NCAA, it's the board of directors that ultimately decides, not the tennis committee. But if the tennis committee were to say we're going to play simultaneous, or we're going to just play 2 singles matches and 1 doubles match, whatever they decide, most of the conferences are going to say, well, if that's the way the championship is going to be played, we want to play the same format. And so even though the authority of the NCAA Tennis Committee is only for its championship, the decisions it makes has an impact on what the conferences do. So when they came forward and said, well, we think at the NCAA team championships, the format should involve in men and women's tennis, Division I, singles players playing 2 sets in a match tiebreaker, we were very concerned, and so was the player development people at the USTA, and there was a lot of discussion, and so that was tabled. And again, that was in the summer of 2012, and then, as I mentioned, in the winter of 2013, we did experiment, and we came forward with a very modest suggestion, which was put into effect, which is that the pro set have a tiebreaker at 7-all rather than at 8-all. And so we put that forward, but a number of administrators and the NCAA committee and others said, well, all of this talk, and if that's not enough of a change, it really doesn't impact on some of the key concerns that many of the athletic directors and some of the people that are very invested at the USTA in trying to help grow college tennis and conference commissioners. So separate from,
let me stop you one second, David. Let me stop you one second. What specifically are those concerns? I mean, what we heard had to do with televising matches and building a television audience. And my contention was, and now is even stronger, that we have excellent live streaming from most of the schools in Division I that people are watching. I mean, the numbers from Athens were incredible. And so if we've got the live streaming available and people are taking advantage of it, then, TV is really, who cares? What we care about is people watching the sport, and I know advertising revenue is a big concern, but let's be honest, nobody's clamoring to put these matches on TV. We can't even get them on the tennis channel. So what are the concerns other than televising?
Well, the point you make is a good point, and when we, again, the ITA has, the way the ITA is structured, each division has an operating committee that makes tennis policy for that division. And when in the summer it was brought to our attention that a group of athletic directors and staff from the NCAA and some staff from the USTA had some meetings with and were putting forward a format to be used and shown on TV in some of the events that the USTA was sponsoring that are called College Match Day events. Mm-hmm. And that format involved singles first, and if a team won 4 points, there would be no doubles played. And if it was tied at 3-all, then there would be 3 doubles teams that would go out, and they would only play a match tiebreaker against the other team. And when the operating committee, when this was brought to our attention, we were extremely concerned because, again, we felt that it was very important to play doubles, and that format would probably mean very little doubles would be played. So, excuse me?
Right. Which, in fact, was the case. Very little doubles.
Yes, right. Played. I believe there was, out of 15 matches, only once did they play doubles. So, we decided we better get together and figure out what's going on. Again, we don't make final decisions for the NCAA. As I explained, what the NCAA does at its championship has a big impact. And coaches of all sports in college, but tennis certainly, answer to their athletic directors. So, the climate was becoming pretty complicated, because if the athletic directors are going to say this is what we want you to do, and people on the NCAA committee are saying we agree, and the USTA is putting a good deal of effort and money into a college match day that's using a format that we think maybe doesn't make a lot of sense. Well, what do we do about that? So what we did is we had a lot of discussions and asked the question you're asking. Well, what is there a problem, and what is driving this? And then if there is some concern, and the concern was, and this came up at the NCAAs a couple of years ago, the fact that often the matches go very long, and even if it's not only a question of TV, but in terms of one, not just at the NCAAs, where you're going to have people come, just like at the U.S. Open, and it's exciting, and it's an event, and you go to that event, and you want to see a lot of tennis. But a lot of the coaches expressed concern that at their team matches, not at a big championship, but at a normal team match, there weren't a lot of people coming, and we heard so many times from many of the coaches that the people that did come often wouldn't stay for the whole match because they're busy, life is moving faster. So what we decided to do, Lisa, was, one, not act like blind to the fact that there was a lot of change in the air, and if we just ignored it, that we could do that and not try to come up with a plan and think that if we ignored what other people were trying and recommending, that it would just go away, because clearly it wouldn't. So we looked really carefully at what are the most important things from the point of view. And again, the operating committee is elected by the membership. There are 12 regions in Division I, men and women, and each region is represented, and then there are also at-large members that are elected. Again, this is men and women Division I, who are on the board of the ITA. So there are about 35 people that are on the board that are on the operating committee. So in looking at this whole conundrum, well, what are the most key things, and how do we approach it? And one of the things we decided to do was to create a steering committee that would have not only some of the members of the operating committee, but some of the coaches who everyone respected who weren't on the operating committee. An example would be Peter Smith, who just won his 5th out of 6 team title at USC.
Very impressive, I'd add. It was an exciting finish to that match.
It was unbelievable, yeah. And unless you're a coach of college tennis, it's really hard to appreciate what a feat it is, how difficult it is to win the NCAA team title. I mean, I coached for 26 years. One year we got to the quarterfinals, which was the best Princeton ever did, and we were very proud of that. But to win that championship is given the quality of the teams and the parity that's developed, it's really incredibly difficult. It's a tremendous accomplishment. And Peter Smith did that 4 years in a row, and then took one, missed last year, but then won it again this year. So 5 out of 6 years, it's almost unimaginable. The only person that probably has exceeded that is Dick Gould, who I believe won 17 team titles as the coach at Stanford, and that never, I think, will ever be matched. We have Peter on the committee, and Manny Diaz, who's been a great coach at Georgia and hosts the NCAA events a lot of times. Claire Pollard, who is the coach at Northwestern. Then we invited some well-known athletic directors who love tennis and are very actively involved in this discussion. The Texas A&M head of athletics, her name is Marcy Gurdon, and Tim Cass, who coached at Texas A&M, but now is the associate athletic director at University of New Mexico, and very knowledgeable. And we also invited John Embry, who's the CEO of the USPTA, which is one of the two great teaching professional teaching associations. I mentioned Dick Gould. He's no longer coaching, but he was on the steering committee. And Paul Goldstein, who people might remember, who's now very successful in business, but was a great college tennis player and did very well on the Pro Tour, and follows tennis. So we got a really good mix. And then we had one of the executives from the Pac-12 conference to look at all this together. And
David, a glaring missing component is the players themselves weren't represented.
Yeah,
I mean, you had Paul, he's a past player, but you didn't have any current players involved, and the current players were pretty outspoken. And and garnered a lot of support for their position, that they didn't want the format messed with. They were very happy with the format as it is. Thank you very much, and please don't change it. We want to play tennis. We want to play real tennis. We want to play
Sure.
the same game we grew up playing in the juniors. We want to play the same game we aspire to play at a professional level. And yet their voice wasn't part of the discussion, sadly.
Well, I wouldn't, yes, they were not on the steering committee, except, again, a number of the people that are on the committee were college tennis players and are spending all of their time with the current college tennis players as coaches. And speaking as a coach for 26 years, you know the players and their feelings and their thoughts better than anything else. So the fact that they weren't on the steering committee doesn't mean that we did send a survey to the players and got responses from the players. So, Lisa, we're not unaware of what you said, but as in our discussions, the question is when you try to figure out what's going to work best. Again, if we had asked the college tennis players in 1990, do you want to go doubles first and play pro sets, 90% would have said no, because it was different, and why should they play a pro set in doubles? They're used to 2 out of 3 sets. If you had asked the players about tiebreakers, they would have said no, because when I'm at Princeton and a player's coming to my team, and at Princeton for 15 years, college tennis, when I was at Princeton, we're using NOAD. I saw this year after year. Someone would come from the junior and say, "What is NOAD, and why do we have to play NOAD?" And then, if the fact was that was what we were doing, they adjusted to it. Some players, after a year or 2 years, said this is great. Some players said it's fine. Some players hated it for 4 years. But whatever decisions are made for, if there is concern that there are 250 programs that have been dropped. Now, that's something that a college tennis player coming to play college tennis that's not their problem. They're not the coach that's going to, unless, and there have been, sadly, situations where a program's been dropped and players suddenly don't have a team to play for.
But they're left hanging. That's happened several times, and most recently with University of Western Kentucky, where an entire team was given 1 day's notice in late May that they weren't going to have a team next year. I mean, that was appalling, absolutely appalling the way that was handled. And you think that, those poor players are, what do you do? It's too late to apply to transfer. The team for the following year. That was just awful.
And I think I mentioned to you before, we've created an advocacy network and try to help programs, have coaches. Again, we're trying to educate the coaches, much less the kids. It's the coach that has to build the roots in the community. The player that's coming to play tennis on the tennis program and is going to school and has papers, exams, hopefully some social life, and a huge demand on their time to develop their tennis and play matches, which is one of the reasons they want to go to college. It's you can't really expect the young college player to get too involved in worrying about how do you save the future of the program in 5 or 10 years. So it's hard enough to get the coaches to realize that if they don't develop community relations, if they don't do a variety of programs that build roots in the community, and if they don't find a way to get people to come and watch the match and stay at the match, their program is going to be very vulnerable. And again, that was one of the driving forces of many of the coaches, not just at a lot of the meetings, that the average attendance at most college matches, again, not talking about the NCAA championship or the team indoors, is very small. And part of it's trying to help the coaches promote better, but so many times we heard, well, if the match takes 4 or 5 hours, except if someone is a diehard fan and maybe doesn't have a lot of work obligations or young family obligations, it's very hard for people to stay for a whole match. And then
to the credit of many of the coaches this year, they have stepped up their efforts big time. And I had the opportunity to talk to Adam Herendeen, who coaches at Presbyterian College. They put together a huge promotion around their college matches this year and saw huge improvements in attendance.
And that's great. Yeah.
The involvement. And Adam's just one of a big number of coaches who are really stepping up and doing that. And I think that message has definitely resonated with the coaches. Hey, look, the onus is on you to get the word out in your community and to garner that support and to provide something that makes the community want to come out, not just by your recruiting efforts or having the top players in the country on your team, but often other exciting kind of sub-events during the matches that will invite the public there. And maybe they're not going to stay for a whole 4-hour match, but who cares? If they're there for a little while and are exposed to the team and get to know the players and, get an opportunity for their kids to hit with the players, I mean, that's what you want. You want to build that support. And as Adam told me, it's a lot more difficult for the college president who happens to be driving by the tennis courts, hearing a lot of cheering going on during a match. It's a lot more difficult for that president to recommend cutting the tennis program, as opposed to driving by and it's you hear crickets and then it's like, well, this program is offering very little of value to the school. So I that message definitely has hit home with these coaches, I think, and there are incredible networks of coaches that are talking on a weekly basis about how they can do better at promoting their teams and promoting their matches, and I want to give huge kudos to them because they get it. They understand that they've got to make their programs relevant. And
what you're saying, Lisa, is totally on target, and it's probably a talk that I've given 1,000 times to the coaches for 15, 20 years, and we've been doing everything that we can think of. We have mentoring calls at our convention. We have conferences about how do you get the media more involved, how do you get the community involved, how do you make, and we have coaches that have been incredibly successful as role models, and they've given talks, and we've had a lot of material. Even before there was a web, we would send out, papers on, this is how you get the local community involved. This is how you get more people. These are promotions you can do during the match. And you're absolutely right. And the more and again, it's a tremendous problem that a number of schools have dropped their programs. And without wanting to be too much of an alarmist, some of the recent developments that everyone's read about involving pressure on the NCAA, legal pressure, maybe Supreme Court pressure, to allow the revenue sports, basketball and football, to give money to the players. And this is moving in that direction because, as you know, as everyone reads about it, here are student athletes in a sport like football or basketball playing basically they're getting scholarships and that's it, but the school is making millions and millions of dollars, and often the students involved not only are only getting scholarships, but often they can't even cover the cost of living, and their families can't. So where that might be heading, though, is if there are major changes, and there might be, where in sports like football, basketball, the athletic departments have to share some of the monies that they have not been sharing, then how are they going to do that? And what will happen to a sport like tennis or golf or track? And there's a lot of worry, not in the distant, we're not talking about 20 years from now, but in a couple of years from now, that if the rules are changed, that could put even more pressure on athletic departments to drop sports because they won't be able to afford. So So your message is one, and I hope you say it almost every podcast. The coaches have to have responsibility, and I've said to everyone, whatever we might change with the format, whatever we don't, the format is not a silver bullet. It's not a magic trick where all of a sudden there are going to be 10,000 people at every match. It's simply one relatively small element in the much bigger picture that you've talked about, which is you have to have the coach somehow, and again, to be fair to the coaches, and having been a coach for 26 years, the coach's first obligation is to the players and the parents of the players, and the coaches spend a huge amount of time working with the players on the court and also trying to help them off the court on a mentoring basis. Then there's enormous pressure on the coaches to recruit, and it's very competitive. And this year alone, I was shocked, but something like 10 in Division I, 10 women's coaches were fired because their teams weren't winning. And there's no question that if a coach doesn't win, often they're going to lose their job. So they spend a great deal of time recruiting, and when we're saying you also have to spend time with the community and promote your matches better, often they'll say, well, where are we going to, and they have to find maybe a little time to have a private life also. They might have a young family. So it's not easy, but we're in a crisis situation. And
Let's switch gears, David. I want to switch gears because we're past the halfway point in the program, and my son's at 1:30 again, so I've got to show on time so I can get back to the tennis. But I want to talk about the meetings that happened in Athens and what is coming, format-wise, scoring-wise, next year. What the discussion is, and also to say that I have heard directly from USTA that whatever the colleges adopt, Division I schools adopt as their scoring format is likely to trickle down to the juniors pretty quickly. So for the junior parents listening who are thinking, well, I have a 10-year-old, why do I care about what's going on at college tennis at this point? You better care, because what they're doing is going to trickle down to what your 10-year-old is doing. And from my perspective, I don't like what I'm hearing. I think it's not good news, but I'd like to hear what you're hearing and what the timeline seems to maybe be for implementing any changes.
Sure. Well, it's still a work in process, so no final decision's been made, and whatever we recommend, we meaning the ITA operating committee and the steering committee, that again is a lot broader than only the coaches, that then has to go and will go to the NCAA tennis committee, because as I explained earlier, we could say that we're going to, have every game will be 1 point, or whatever we say, it doesn't matter in the long run if the NCAA tennis committee and the NCAA cabinet don't say, yes, we agree this makes sense and we're going to use it in the NCAA championships at the end of the spring. So that process, are reviewing all the discussions, all the experiment, all the surveys. We've conservatively spent in groups of 30 or 40, without exaggerating, maybe 30 or 40 hours discussing all of this just this year, plus a lot of larger groups at all the different championships. So the timeline is that this month we need to figure out what we will recommend. And it also, by the way, Lisa, there is more discussion on moving possibly the singles and doubles of the NCAA championships to the fall. And maybe, again, it's called a super regional concept, where you would have, again, there's 64 teams, men, and 64 women in the NCAA championship. Right now, as everyone knows, you play 2 matches, and then you have 16 teams, men and women, come to the final site. There's been a lot of discussion because of different problems that have come up with having 32 teams at the same site, that maybe it might work better to have the first 3 weekends in a row, and the first weekend, again, there's 16 sites, everyone plays 2 matches. Then the next weekend, there are 8 matches at each, or 8 sites, and each site has 2 teams, and the winners of that then go to the final site, so that the final site would have 8 men's and 8 women's teams. So that's part of the discussion along with format. In terms of format, and again, this was a lot of discussion, and we came up with a couple basic premises. One, and again, this is the premise of the steering committee, the operating committee, after a lot of discussion. One, that the men and women should do the same thing. That it's too confusing when the men do one thing and the women do another.
Right.
So that was decided. Secondly, that doubles is very important, and because of that, it needs to be played in every match. And in the survey we did of the players, I think 97% said that. So one of the premises that you have to have doubles first.
Good.
And then the third premise, and this is where you might disagree, I think you do disagree, but the feeling was that it's important to make the team match a little shorter without destroying the integrity of the match, so that in general the match would be, somewhere in the 3 minutes, 3 hours, 15 minutes, rather than 4.5 hours. Understanding that there might be some long matches that go 4 hours, and there might be some that take 2 hours. So those were the basic premises, and that finally there was going to have to be some compromise among the coaches in order to do this, because the women were moving in one direction, the men in another. So where we're at right now is, and again, it's far from being finalized. One, we experimented with, and most of the coaches and maybe the players, because again, understanding for the players, a lot of this is an acquired taste. So what I'm going to mention is not warming up with your opponent. And the feeling was, that in almost every other sport, when you have a team match, not an individual competition, that you go out and you start, and that it would save some time, but also make it feel more like a team sport. So one recommendation would be no warm up with opponents.
Okay, but that's 5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Excuse me?
That's 5 minutes.
5 and on each doubles and singles. Yeah.
10 minutes. Come
but
on.
You see, one of the things. So again, Lisa, just with the premise that none of this is magic or a silver bullet, but when you start chopping away 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, and you begin to make the match move in a little faster fashion, which is again one of the feelings that many of the coaches felt. Again, that there were ways to make the match shorter without destroying the integrity of the match, and the feeling was, and that's why we experimented for six weeks, that the outcome of the matches, the better players won, even though there was no warm-up with opponents. That this, again, you're warming up for an hour or half an hour before you get on the court. So anyway, that's, again, one recommendation. There's doubles first. No ad is definitely being very seriously considered.
Which let me just say, no ad to me is disastrous, and I'll tell you why I say that. I was there for the men's team final. I was there for the women's team final in Athens.
Right.
Both of the team finals came down to a final court. The final game in each of those matches, the men's and the women's, went to deuce ad multiple times before the final point was played and won. And the excitement in the stands in those final games was palpable. And no ad would have ripped that right away. It would have taken away all the anticipation and excitement. And for that reason, and that reason only, I can say, God, why would you even consider eliminating that piece of the puzzle? It's the most exciting part is watching a player fight back from, ad out when they're serving and having that pressure and, getting the deuce point back and holy cow! I mean, I was on the edge of my seat, and I had no vested interest in either of those teams, and I was sweating with anticipation and adrenaline. Why would the committee even consider doing away with that?
Well, there are a lot of reasons, but let me start by saying, as you mentioned, I did write a book about college tennis and the 1978 NCAA championships, and I've seen all the championships since 1977 when we're talking about the team championship, and I've never seen a more exciting match in my life than the finals of the 1978 singles championship, where John McEnroe, who had already gone into the semis at Wimbledon, played John Sadri. No ad scoring. The score was 7-6, 7-6, 5-7, 7-6. Every point was exciting. There were 5,000 people watching and going crazy. And that was no ad. Michael Pernfors won the NCAAs twice using no ad, and Georgia won the championships. And I can tell you that the suspense and the excitement was also palpable. And so, in terms of excitement, that ironically is one of the reasons why the coaches feel it makes sense to go back to no-ed, because every game there's a moment where the red flag goes up, which was Jimmy Van Allen's creation, and where that moment becomes ultimately exciting. Now, from a coaching point of view and a player development point of view, you can make a very good case that having to play in every game with every point counting creates that much more pressure and is a development tool that is very positive. And the players know that they can't have one mental lapse because every point becomes much more important. So in terms of fan excitement, I mean, there's 15 years history, and the turnouts at the NCAA in those years and the excitement, I wish it were the same now, but it was unbelievable. And in terms of the player development opportunity, again, a number of the coaches, Lisa, for example, Steve Denton is on the operating committee and is the coach at Texas A&M. Well, I don't know if you know Steve, but Steve played for Texas and graduated in 1979. He and Kevin Curran won the NCAA doubles title. In singles, he was number 4 on the team. No one ever thought he would be a very good player on the tour. Well, he got to be 10 in the world, and he got to be a finals at the Australian Open. And, Steve said that no ad scoring when he played it helped him become a much better, tougher player. And Manny Diaz says the same thing, and Peter Smith, and Dick Gould. So you have more on the men's side, because the women didn't join the NCAA till 1981, and they only had a few years at most of playing no-ed before it switched back. There's no right or wrong with this. But what I can say, with all the years I've been involved, that you can make a very good case that the players who played no-ed scoring during their college career, the better players did win. And when you look at the Paul Anacones and the Michael Pernfors, that was all during no-ed, and Kevin Curran and John McEnroe. So, it doesn't create a lot of upsets because the better players and the better teams won year after year. A lot of people feel it was very exciting, and they want to create. And one of the things, Lisa, that in terms of format that was high on the list, TV was, in terms of the steering committee, operating committee, they felt TV was not the most important thing. They felt creating more excitement for the match was very important, and that the no-ed, besides being very good for player development, did create an opportunity for more excitement. Now, it's an acquired taste. I can tell you, I coached 4 players that got to be top 100 in the world. 2, Leif Shires, who's still doing TV commentary, and Jay Lapidus, who was the coach at Duke after the Pro Tour. They got to be 30 in the world. Steve Meister got to be top 5 in the world in doubles. So, I coached those players, and when they came to Princeton, we were using no ad, and I can tell you that to start with, they kind of looked at me like, is college tennis great? Why are you using no ad? But the answer was because that's what we're doing, and very quickly they adapted to it, and they all benefited from it. So, the fact is, if you take, as we did now, and you take the college kids and you say, okay, you're going to have to play no ad for 3 times or 4 times, and that's it. It's an experiment. Of course, a lot of them are going to say, well, we don't want to do it, and why should we do it? And it's only 3 or 4 times, so why should we do it at all? But if the decision is by everyone, by the NCAA, by everyone, that we're going to use no ad, I promise you, and we should set a date if you're willing, in a year from now. If it because it might not be no ad at all, but I'm sure if we do make that recommendation and if it's put into effect, I'm sure if we talk a year from now and you talk to a lot of the players, most of them are not going to be upset that they were using no ad, and they're going to be mentally tougher, and because we used it for 17 years and it developed a lot of great players, and then we were pressured by the USTA to not use no ad, and that's when player development started, and they said, ironically, this is 1987 or 1980, the USTA said, well, we're using regular scoring in the juniors, and if you use no ad, that's going to make it impossible for the players to be good pros, where we had 15 years of very good players become outstanding pros. So, we went back to regular scoring, and, starting in 1988, 89, and in 25 years, there have only been a few college players that have, become top 10 or 20 in the world.
There are a lot of reasons for that, which we don't have time to touch on today. But I tell you
Sure.
what, I will take that bet. I'm virtually shaking your hand right now. And
okay, it's a deal.
And I will take that bet.
And I'll tell you, if you win the bet, treat you if we get together somewhere, I'll treat you a very nice dinner.
Awesome. I'll see you in Waco next year. We'll do it there.
It's a date.
But one thing I would like to point out is that I feel like there's so much confusion over the format, over the scoring. I mean, even for me, and I call myself a pretty devoted tennis fan. When the NCAA championships switched from the team event to the individual event, I had no idea. I had no idea that the doubles in the individual event played 2 out of 3 sets. I thought they were playing 8-game pro sets. So, I mean, and again, I consider myself, fairly educated, and was taken by surprise by that. Don't you think all these changes and all this just serves to confuse the public even more about what's already a complicated sport, and makes them throw their hands up and say, I can't be bothered with this, I'm going to go watch a baseball game. It's 3 outs, 3 strikes, you're out, 3 outs, it's the other guy's turn, and let's move on, and whoever's got the most points at the end of 9 innings wins the game. Boom, we're done. Nothing to think about.
Yeah, I think the point you're making is a very good one, and that's one of the things we kept hearing this year from administrators saying, look, you've been experimenting for 2 or 3 years. You've tried different things, including the college match day, including the women trying 2 sets in a match, and the message we're getting from the athletic directors and the conferences are, enough experimenting. You have to make a decision, and if you don't make it, we're going to make it for you, because it is too confusing. And so that's part of the pressure on us, because again, to say we're not going to change anything, we really, in all honesty, don't have that option. The coaches can say that, the players can say it. It's going to be changed for us. We've been told that. We don't run college sports, and so.
But you run college tennis. I mean, I understand that you don't run the championships, but the ITA is the organization in charge of college tennis in this country at all levels. Division 1, 2, NAIA, junior college. I mean, it's you. So, I mean, the crudeness in me comes out when I say, stand up for these kids, stand up for our game, and tell the NCAA, don't screw with our sport. Our sport is beautiful. The scoring is beautiful. It's been like this, and you're going to maybe shave 5-10 minutes off a dual match. That's not going to change anything in terms of television rights and advertising. What's going to change it is the coaches and the teams partnering with the universities, with their marketing departments, with their communications departments, and building a fan base in their community to get, again, pardon my crudity, but to get butts in seats. And, that's what it's going to take. And stop messing with our sport. Let's devote our time and energy on helping these coaches do a better job of developing relationships in their community, developing relationships within their university itself, within their college, so that they can tap the resources that are already there and generate their fan base that way. And I'm sorry, I feel like ITA needs to stand up for these student athletes. These student athletes put everything on the line, and I saw it. I saw the heart out there. I saw these kids studying for exams, writing papers, taking exams, all the while training to compete for their school. And I just feel like the ITA needs to really defend them and be their advocate and preserve the integrity of the game.
Yeah, again, I agree with most of what you said, and the one thing where I feel it's important for you to keep an open mind, or people to, is I think we have history on our side in saying that for a 15-year period, when the college matches did use NOAD, college tennis prospered and the players prospered, and they took exams, and it was exciting, and they had great college tennis careers, and in some cases pro careers, and a lot of other successful careers. So I think the coaches and the decisions and the recommendations are in exactly what you're saying, that we do not feel, if this goes forward, that in any possible way it's going to damage the integrity of the game, or if anything, it will create more excitement for the players. And part of tennis, the famous quote from Billie Jean King, pressure is a privilege. Right. And what NOAD does is it puts in every game a little more pressure, and that's a privilege because it helps the players develop as better players, but also handling pressure in other ways. So, but we're on the same page.
Right. But David, for the casual fan who turns on television and watches a professional tennis match and sees a scoring format played in professional tennis, and then says, oh, my local college team is supposed to be pretty good. I'm going to go out and see what they've got. I'm going to see how that compares to what I see on TV. Right. And they show up at this college match, and it's played in a very different manner than what they've watched on television. Again, I think it's going to serve only to confuse fans more, only to ensure that the devoted tennis fan who already shows up at the matches is going to be the one that continues to come, but inviting new fans is going to be very difficult. They're not going to understand, why is it different on TV than it is here? And then, when my kid goes to play the game, it's different there too. And what's really tennis? I don't get it,
but Lisa, there are a couple of things. One, on pro tennis, they are using NOAD in doubles, so it's not a foreign concept if people watch. But secondly, as you know, other than the Open or maybe Wimbledon, there are the tennis ratings are very low. So the people, and you don't, when you watch tennis on TV, it's different from college tennis. You don't have doubles first and then singles, and it's a completely different concept. The whole idea of NOAD is it makes things simpler. That's what it was called. So nothing's easier to understand if someone comes out and says, well, what are they doing? It's simple. You go 1, 2, 3, 4. And, for someone that you want to attract new people.
Are we going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 instead of 15, 30, 40 games?
That's going to be discussed. But again, if you're trying not to confuse people, and you want to have people come out that maybe aren't yet tennis fans, and you want to convert, that's one of the other things. You have to create a broader base than people. We're at the end of the show. I'm sorry, I hate to cut us off, but we are at the end of the hour. I want to thank you for coming on. We have a date a year from now to check in, and I look so forward to seeing you in Waco, Texas next year and comparing notes. And thank you again so much for sharing your passion, your knowledge, and your experience with my listeners. I appreciate it so much. Well, thank you, Lisa, and thank you for sharing your passion and knowledge with everyone. And I'll look forward to our date a year from now. Hopefully we'll have a chance to talk before then. And I think we all want the same thing, which is to see college tennis grow and prosper and add programs, not drop programs.
Exactly. Well, thank you again to my listeners. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next week on Parenting Aces.
Bye-bye.